And I'd personally also like to extend that thanks to Manchester team and all the other 7 centres that are represented here today. You've all given of your time and your expertise on a Saturday voluntarily, and we're really grateful for that. I'm born in Manchester, so it's nice to be home again. But actually, I've spent the last 45 years in London, and my experience was coloured from my NHS experience working as a paediatrician, and then a endocrinologist with children who'd had brain tumours and the effects of radiotherapy on hormones. And I've always had a holistic approach to the care of these children. I looked after them before they were having chemotherapy because they were presenting with problems. And beyond that, I've always been interested to learn, and I've learned so much from them. And it drove me to set up the charity as I retired from the NHS with colleagues and parents, and not much else except a lot of passion, to try and change the balance, and now that 80% were actually living long lives. And although we had thought that a lot of it was due to treatment, and if we could change the treatment, we might avoid some of the what we call late effects, I began to wonder whether actually it was due to developmental issues that were there from the start. And were we missing, and I think we are, that all children with a brain tumour actually have a brain injury. And we need, when we talk about curing the tumour, we need to cure that as well as stabilise the tumour. And then we might know what the tumour causes, what the treatment causes, and what lack of rehabilitation is to blame for. We might actually save some money and personal cost in the way. So we set up the charity wanting to help the NHS bring ideas for innovation, amplify the voice of survivors, and help network both the families who are feeling isolated, but also professionals working in this field. I felt myself that it was very difficult to get the services that these children needed, especially as we were now generally in medicine getting better at curing any disease, but they had chronic problems. So all our psychiatry services are absolutely swamped, as is the neurorehabilitation. And what we thought we might be able to get in 2005, when we sat round the table and put these statements in place, is probably very different to what we can get in 2025. And I know because I sat round that table, and it says that rehabilitation can make a difference and should be offered to all children with cancers, but complex rehabilitation packages should be given to children with brain tumours. And actually that's been reiterated in 2014 with detail about what a complex care package might look like, who should commission it, who should receive it, who should refer within it, and what children deserve. But what they're hoping for is not, I'm hearing, but I'd like to hear how you all access things and whether there are gaps and best practices that we can put together to make a case so that we can modernise the services for the modern success that we're having in curing many cancers and many other diseases. But let's do it for this group well, and there might be models that others can learn. And what we've thought about is that actually the problem is that the late effects model, we've been looking at treatment toxicity and thinking, well, you've got to be cured first, and that's a cancer model, and then we can monitor the toxicities. Actually is very different, as JP was saying. A lot of these children haven't got cancers, and therefore a 5-year cure is not a very good measure, a 5-year survival, because some of them may well have lived. It's a question of how do they live? And we're not collecting those measures. They're much harder to measure, but I think we should. And we should collect them from the beginning. They should be neurodevelopmental and neurorehabilitation, and they should be hormonal and growth and development of the child's body and brain. And the other change that's happened is, as paediatricians, we used to talk about paediatric cancers under 16, 450 a year. But We've also moved to taking in young people, 16 to 24, and there's another 500 there. And they have different types of tumours. And the specification in the adult brain tumour reference says that they should have access to cancer site-specific MDTs, which are age-appropriate. So within the adult service, there is a possibility for you to be referred up to a specialist team for rare, for example, pituitary tumours. That does not exist for children. And since we've had age-appropriate care where everyone must be treated in the right way, it's prevented us endocrinologists who have little experience of these tumours, the adults, as you will hear from Dr. Elwin later, have much more experience because it's much more common. We've been running around trying to learn from them, and we need to have dedicated teams that honour that from the beginning. And we have, together with the Children's Cancer and Leukemia Group, at my request actually, and with the two paediatric and adult endocrine societies, provided 3 guidelines for them that are on the CCLG website, that have been endorsed by the Royal College of Child Health. And the pituitary tumour adenomas has been published this year in Nature, and the other 2 have been published in the Lancet. And we would like to see services develop around that. And it was part of our remit to try and harness evidence that we could try what's working, what's not working, what's changed, so that we could make an informed lobby with your help, a multi-professional one that made sense. That we don't just ask for more money, but we actually think about where we can save it, where we can rationalize it, how we can streamline it. We're all becoming much more specialists. We're not holistic anymore. So oncology is a huge workload now. So there isn't enough to go around, but we think there should be a parallel recovery pathway from the beginning, which honours neurorehabilitation and endocrine development, with a spoke up to the pituitary service and a key worker who we might pump prime if you think it's a good idea. From success, we could try and raise money for that. We want to know what would make sense to raise our chances of raising money for these things, because we can't get money for this aspect of care otherwise unless we have your support. And why do I think that the late effects isn't enough? Well, this is overall brain tumour survival, and some people were surprised that a brain tumour means an 80% chance of cure. And you can see the improvements that have been made over the decades across 0 to 25. And this is the first registry that has taken 0 to 25, the NCRAS National Registry, and it's only just beginning to mature. It only started in 2012. And they are beginning to separate tumours, they are beginning to look at this, and I think there's an opportunity for us to collect data about outcomes, not just survival. If we can define what the quality of survival means. And maybe, and we've discussed this at PSYOP and in brain tumour trials, I've been part of that quality of survival group, maybe it would be nice if clinical trials in the future actually didn't only look at tumour stabilisation or response rate as the primary outcome, but actually a quality of survival measure that would allow us to put that in. And it seems to me that even for the 20% of children who may have a poor prognosis but are going through even more heavy treatment or recurrent treatment, we owe it to them that if they are going to survive, and that's what we're treating them for, they have the chance of the best life possible. And during their treatment, they are also supported to develop, because it might take 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And some children are losing the whole of the developmental opportunity through childhood when the brain is young and has the greatest chance of recovery. And we have children in this charity who were told they were going to die. We do talk about the die word, and who are alive, and they're feeding back to us what it feels like and what they would like to change. And that's very valuable. And it costs in other terms too, if we don't get it right at the beginning. These are secondary hospitalizations in cancer survivors, and the leukemias are at the top, and the brains are the second most common cancers in children. And you can see that the orange bars are children being admitted to hospital for tumor-related problems, their recurrences, their recurrence again, and that's a lot for brain tumors because a lot of them are difficult, low-grade tumors that are inoperable because of where they are, and they keep coming back despite treatment, despite chemotherapy. Then the other life-threatening conditions they end up with are endocrine, hormone deficiencies, adrenal crises, diabetes with its life-threatening implications, huge obesity, which becomes diabetes because of problems in the deep midbrain, neurological conditions, which are in brown, and even a worrying blue bar, which is suicide risk. And the tumor, we know if you've had a brain injury, you're more likely to have learning and mental health susceptibility. And yet we don't plan for that. And we should. A lot of parents have said to me, I have a different child, that's fine, that's great, but I wish I'd known and I wish I'd been able to get help sooner because I would have planned it better and it would have made a big difference. And I think we need to do that. And until we can get in and measure hormones and growth and development and sexual maturity from the beginning in every single child. So this is optic hypothalamic gliomas, which occur anywhere from here, the vision pathways out to the back of the brain. And the hypothalamus is not visible on a scan, but it is our life center. It controls our very being. It's the most primitive evolutionary organ in our body. Even dinosaurs had it. And it sends a whole spectrum of messages. It's like a big motorway that's got traffic going all around it in every direction. So it doesn't just matter if your tumor is in the pituitary. It also matters if it's in the hypothalamus or in the glands it supports. Because if you have a block on the motorway, it will back the traffic further up and it will prevent the messages coming forward. And this study took us 40 years, and it's the largest study of infants under 3 with hypothalamic and optic pathway gliomas. These are benign tumors which, if they occur anywhere else in the brain, can be removed. Where they are there, they can't because of the damage they will do easily. And we believed radiotherapy was causing toxicity. Chemotherapy might be the answer. It hasn't worked as well. There are new drugs. But what about if actually the problem is there from the start? And you'll see what we've learned is that the overall survival is high but falls over time, and they're not all tumor deaths. There are endocrine deaths, there are neurological deaths. These children don't always have a good quality of life. And the deficits which you're seeing in the bold are hormones, but also behavioral and other problems which manifest over time. And they mirror the number of recurrences these children have, which is very high. And you see things changing. So an infant might develop precocious puberty that later becomes hormone deficiency. They have a wasting syndrome where you can't get weight on them, and they later have obesity, which is morbid. They have growth hormone excess and then growth hormone deficiency. And you don't see the developmental change unless you follow the same child through the same journey. And those are much higher, more difficult outcomes to measure than survival alone. And actually these midbrain tumors, I've shown you this one, and there are 2 malignant ones up there. They've always been high survival. And these lower grade ones in the pituitary are also high survival. In an adult world, the optics don't appear because they seem to have a predilection for infants. But everything else occurs and seems to increase as it gets older. Children with craniopharyngiomas have a particular type of disease, which I think is different from the adult variety, and we're learning about that. But they've always in the adult life been treated with pituitary teams who can also operate through the nose if need be, and can manage the crises that occur around it. And I think we need to learn and make that service available for children too. And this is the signaling pathway that I've tried to show. And you have a tumor in that vital area, somewhere along that pathway. And if we don't know what it's causing from the beginning, usually it's a growth problem. But who cares about growth? Who monitors it? But it's there. I can assure you it's there, even before we impose radiotherapy. And yet we've tended to blame it on the radiotherapy. There may be learning deficits there. If you then impose chemotherapy, which affects all the organs in the body, and the messaging signaling back, you've got, how do you know which it was? Was the problem up there or down in the glands or both? And then you give more treatment to the brain, and then you say, well, the last treatment that did it must have caused it. We need to have this from the beginning, and it is very vital. So our thought is, and this is just that if, and there has been some support for this from oncologists, that if we have a parallel rehabilitation recovery team, which includes endocrine support from the beginning, that assesses children at key stages of development that we know they have to pass through: infancy, childhood, puberty, young adulthood, and which we know neuroscience is affected by hormones, and we know those developmental phases of the brain and learning don't become mature until adolescence. And if it could be led by a consultant who can also advocate and make sure those services are delivered, and brings with them a team, make sure they're put out into the community, and with a consultant endocrinologist who can decide which tumours need an endocrine nurse to support their peripheral toxicity, and which actually need more detailed investigation of this pituitary axis that we can understand it. We feel that might be a solution. And if in the neuro-oncology treatment pathway we could add a bit that there's a step up for a bespoke service for pituitary tumours, we feel that might be saving a lot of money in the long run, streamlining for everybody, and making sure that those services are delivered. It's an idea, and it's our thought that we could pump prime the link. Examples of others: Rainbow in Cambridge was a service that was pump primed by charity for 10 years, and the NHS is beginning to take it over. It's helped 80 children at £2,000 a child per year, which is not a lot when you look at the costs of what late recovery and lost employment, and if need be, medico-legal negligence claims. If you can prove your tumour was a bit late diagnosed, you can get claim for all the rehabilitation. And it works. But it's millions. The NHS negligence bill is 120 billion, and it's doubled in 5 years. So if we can do that and get more children into employment, they tell us they can't get jobs, that's what they want, we believe that that would be better. And if we can get it right first time, for a recovery to be part of the cure across the lifespan, with meaningful outcomes that we can measure about what benefits are, we can raise money for it better, we can get it allocated better, and there may be models that also come across with others in terms of other diseases.